Hey everyone! What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Fusion Deck User in a different Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 401. Burns' death was a miserable sight. Normally, Hikaru had no interest in excessive punishments, but in a shadow duel, Thousand Eyes Restrict carried a truly terrifying presence. As the first boss monster in the entire Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise, it indeed had something special about it. After Burns' death, the Fusion Army soldiers did not beg for mercy like the ones Hikaru had encountered before, nor did they display the usual Fusion Army attitude of losing a duel doesn't matter, I'll keep fighting. Instead, they shouted that the Fusion Army would surely send stronger soldiers in the future, that they would find Hikaru's weakness, and that he would pay in blood. Hikaru wasn't interested. He thought about sending them to Kaiba Corp, but Tiara had already acted, tearing them to pieces instantly. Hikaru frowned slightly, but said nothing. For stubborn Fusion Army fanatics, their deaths warranted no comment. Tiara's puppet strings grasped Burns' corpse, pulling out a sphere-shaped soul and the number card from his body. She toyed with the card, examining it briefly. As with Crazy Box and Dragula's before, Hikaru had no interest in taking it. On one hand, it meant resisting the corruption of numbers, on the other, Hikaru had no use for them in his deck. Better to leave them with Tiara, she might actually make use of them. With that done, Tiara wasted no words. She summoned the higher-ranking Frightfur spirits before her and questioned them directly. She could tell the little bear was just a child and knew nothing of substance. As their savior and goddess, even without demonstrating apocalyptic power, Tiara had already earned their willingness to speak. Her claimed divinity only reinforced it. Through this, Hikaru learned the true nature of the Frightfur. The Frightfur race was unique, split into two groups, angels and demons, the Fluffles and the Edgeimps. By studying, working together, and training, they would grow and evolve into Frightfurs, their combined forms. This was a long, arduous process requiring great effort. Especially with the fractured state of the spirit world, these newly born spirits were in far more danger compared to other factions. Fearing for the future, the higher-ranking Frightfurs, in an accident, signed a pact with the Fusion Army. The deal: the Fusion Army would strengthen the Edgeimps and help them cultivate stronger, more numerous spirits, in exchange for the Frightfurs' aid in battle. At first, this was an ordinary contract, no different from Hikaru's cooperation with the magicians of the Grand Spellbook Tower. But as the alliance continued, they inevitably learned more of the Fusion Army, that they were no benefactors, but exploiters using science, spirits, and cards to enslave, destroy, or control spirits, and killing humans for profit. And yet, even after realizing this, the Frightfurs didn't break the pact. They merely watched in silence. Until, in the end, they too were discarded. I see. Ordinary, nothing special. Tiara showed no interest after hearing their tale. Betrayal, war, enslavement, cold indifference, swept into the flames of conflict, she'd seen it too often to care. How many remain? Frightfur Leo lowered his head. Only I am left. Tiara swept her gaze across the dimension, calculating carefully, and found that roughly 50 spirits still survived. Then prepare yourselves for the vengeance of the bereaved, show your sincerity, and never repeat such deeds again. Frightfur Leo bowed low before her, trembling, hesitant. Speak if you have something to say. Goddess, the Edgeimps must play the villains, and the Fluffles must harmonize with them. Only then can they unite. But our people are dwindling. If attacked again by another race or by the unknown force that shattered the spirit world, we won't be able to survive. Fools. Resorting to violence and distortion in the name of protection only reduces your numbers further, making you even more desperate for outside aid. That's a vicious cycle, not protection. And Tiara lifted her hand. The plush bear floated upward, spinning in panic. It acknowledged me as its goddess with genuine faith. For that, I'll extend my protection to you as well. So, hear my oracle. I won't explain, and you won't object. Understand? Her eyes burned with eerie blue flames. A single glare made Frightfur Leo collapse, shivering and clutching his head in terror, stammering, "Understood." Understood. Inside, though, it despaired. Escaping human control, only to fall under the thumb of a monstrous being in spirit skies, this was no savior. As for angels saving and demons harming, combining in harmony, though I like the idea, it has no real meaning. Tiara spoke confidently. Over her year of awakening, she had observed countless spirit evolutions and was certain of one truth. Evolution had nothing to do with behavior. Only two things mattered: energy and faith. In other words, whether dark world fiends, light-sworn angels, or holy knights, the path to evolution was always the same: do what they truly believed in, and grow stronger. As for evolution, you needn't worry. I already know what to do. Really? Frightfur Leo gasped. Lesser spirits cheered, and the little bear even danced in celebration. Could their goddess truly control evolution itself? Hey, Hikaru Amaki, get over here. These spirits need you to explain fusion. The great spell, summon Hikaru Amaki. Hikaru couldn't help but laugh to himself. Chapter 402 of The Answer to Fusion. The Frightfur Leo looked at Hikaru. At this moment, they realized the importance of this man. Just like before, in his duel against the fusion army, this human had nearly always been on top, even using fusion to defeat what it had believed to be the invincible number 24. As a warrior, he was indeed outstanding. More than that, he could even accomplish the feat of fusing synchro monsters with fusion monsters. No. It calmed itself, thinking carefully, and suddenly felt a sense of dread. All this time, it had only feared that unknown godlike being. The Frightfur tribe had suffered so many wounds recently that its mind had been filled solely with how to survive in this environment, never noticing the other details. Thinking further, the way this human named Hikaru Amaki fought in duels was frightening in its own right. After all, in those battles, even that god trusted this human deeply. This human was no ordinary person. It greeted Hikaru respectfully, even secretly exposing the paw pads of its hand, wanting to lift him up so he could speak to all the spirits. However, Hikaru did not oblige. Instead, he walked straight up to the Frightfur spirits, first surveying them briefly. Then he spoke softly, "My name is Hikaru Amaki. I am Hikaru of humanity, Hikaru of fusion, a duelist devoted to pursuing the ultimate in fusion. My belief is singular: fusion is the noblest form of summoning." The little spirits exchanged nervous glances, some, suffering from PTSD, even hid behind the older ones. The Frightfur Leo hastily withdrew its paw and hesitantly asked, "Lord Hikaru, are you with the fusion army as well?" "No. I am myself," Hikaru said calmly. "Do you have anything you wish to ask?" He stood there before them all. After Tiara's questioning earlier and his own observations, Hikaru had fully confirmed the truth of the Frightfurs. First of all, Frightfurs were not an ancient spirit tribe. On the contrary, they were very young, no more than a few decades old. Their origin lay in the frightening toys of the world, a new bloodline among spirits. This matched Hikaru's own observations. He was certain, aside from Fluffles and Edgems, the Frightfur fusion monsters consisted only of wolves, tigers, bears, and lions. Even if one counted a sheep that had perished before it could reappear, there were still only a handful. Forget about ultimate class fusions like Frightfur Mary or Frightfur Kraken. Even Frightfur Chimera, a card Sora particularly loved in the Arc V, did not exist. Yes. Among all Frightfurs, the highest ranked was this very Frightfur Leo, and by its own admission, it had only reached this form after evolving in a duel against a duelist from the X dimension. That was how basic the Frightfurs really were. And yet, for Hikaru, that made them all the more suitable. He had come to this dimension specifically to gather the Frightfurs. And he knew perfectly well that, in one way or another, the Frightfurs and the fusion army had a connection. That said, now, the Frightfurs were only just starting out. Though their understanding of fusion was somewhat distorted, it seemed more a result of long-term collaboration with the fusion army, which had led to a skewed comprehension. This could still be corrected in time. After a long silence with no questions, one trembling Fluffaltoy timidly raised its hand. Its companion, alarmed, tried to hold it back, but the hand was already raised. All right, go ahead. Human, since you used synchro summoning, why? Such a sharp question, right away. The Frightfur Leo grew nervous. Hikaru chuckled and said, Synchro? XYZ? Those things don't really matter. You're a rabbit, right? Think of it like Burns's duel earlier. He used 2 level 6 fusion monsters to overlay and summon a rank 6 monster, and then continued the fight. In essence, there was nothing wrong with that. Huh? None of them expected Hikaru to say that. In truth, the issue wasn't that he performed an XYZ summon, nor that he relied on an XYZ monster as his ace. It was that his words and actions didn't match. To me, whether it's a synchro or an XYZ doesn't matter. As long as it can be fused, as long as it advances my fusion, as long as it calls forth a fusion monster, then whatever steps it takes along the way are acceptable. The young spirits looked at one another, shocked, yet none could refute him. Oh, of course, this only applies to the duel itself. If it's just about becoming stronger by attacking others, that is absolutely unacceptable. But if we don't play tricks, how can we evolve? This time it was an axe spirit, glowing with 2 blood-red eyes, that questioned Hikaru in confusion. Doing evil? That doesn't matter. Do you know? In the world of justice, a world devoted to justice, there is a group of Lightsworn warriors who have fought other tribes for countless years, and among them are even demons. So don't worry about your race. Fusion does not require committing evil. As long as you can understand fusion, then you can surely evolve. On this matter, Hikaru spoke from rich experience. First year, he undermined the fusion army from within. Second year, he established the coalition to oppose them. And in his third year, he began guiding new students and deepening the understanding of fusion within the fusion department. With practice comes ease. Faced with these younger, simpler-minded spirits, he explained while pulling out the Emerald Book. Though it had been awkward before, Hikaru had long since accepted it. He brought out a player, showing the young spirits a few classic duels, edited highlights produced by Kaiba Corp and circulated within the fusion department. Among them were classics like Clash, The Legendary Duelist, Hikaru Amaki vs Rex Raptor in his match against Weevil Underwood. There was also footage of his fight against the professional Duelist X, likewise edited by Kaiba Corp. Whoa! Even the Frightfur Leo sat down in the middle, watching Hikaru's duel against Weevil. Seeing Hikaru even win against something like a fixed deck and extreme outside interference, it couldn't help but cheer. Meanwhile, as the videos played, Tiara was controlling the bodies of the dead. Whether spirit or human, she forcibly commanded them, using her authority to drive the dimension's workings. Soon, the corpses dissolved into foam, merging with the world. She closed her eyes, sensed for a while, then told Hikaru. This dimension will give birth to 7 to 10 new spirits. Hikaru raised a brow. So, she had straightforwardly reincarnated the humans as spirits? No, more accurately, she had accelerated the workings of this dimension, speeding the cycle of souls. The reborn spirits are brand new souls, brand new lives, Tiara said. They are purer, unlike those half brainwashed by the fusion army, and will understand you more quickly. She had, in fact, given Hikaru a gift. A spirit tribe with fusion as its main strategy. As this dimension revived, its outdated, mistaken beliefs would be corrected. Then, all its spirits would be drawn to Hikaru, without him needing to go through the trials of other dimensions, collecting them card by card by card. Hikaru nodded to her. So in that case, he should lend even more help in rebuilding the Frightfur tribe. Just then, among the spirits watching the video, a sudden violet light flared. The group quickly cleared a space, eyes turning to the glowing sheep. My goodness! The Frightfur Leo clutched its head, pulling out its own stuffing. Wah! The other spirits simply cheered. A sheep, together with a small chain-shaped imp, began evolving, slowly transforming into a sheep wrapped in sharp steel chains. It had evolved. Looking closer, this spirit had already been on the verge of evolution, but this time it showed all Frightfurs one truth. They didn't need to follow the Fusion Army scientists' methods. They had a more reasonable, correct path of evolution. It's real, it's all real. The lion, wolf, and tiger spirits exchanged glances, reading each other's shock. Then, they held greater respect for Tiara and greater awareness that Hikaru Amaki was no ordinary being. What they had always believed in was wrong. Fusion was never so limited. Chapter 403. After spending a few days, Hikaru asked the allied army's spirits to help the Frightfurs tidy up the 2 dimensions their tribe inhabited. He then attended a few more days of classes before finally returning to the critical nexus. This adventure in the Frightfur Sanctuary could be said to be the most rewarding of Hikaru's dimensional travels so far. Besides his initial self-obtained card, Edge Imp Chain, Hikaru also gained many Fluffle cards. In truth, Hikaru could have just taken Burns J's entire deck, but upon inspection, he realized many of those cards were spirits forcibly transformed into cards by the Fusion Army's dual discs. While it wasn't necessarily a big deal to use them, Hikaru ultimately left those behind in the Frightfur Factory dimension, so they could recover more quickly under Tiara's accelerated reincarnation. Therefore, Hikaru only accepted cards from the higher-level Frightfur spirits. These included their pre-fusion cards as well as some others. Quite a lot, in fact. After counting them, Hikaru realized he had as many as 7 or 8 copies of Frightfur Patchwork. Honestly, that was far too many. Although Hikaru had never used a Frightfur deck before, he did already possess cards like Frightfur Fusion and Frightfur Patchwork. He just lacked the low-level monsters and fusion monsters to make use of them. Suddenly acquiring so many at once, Hikaru truly didn't know what to do with them. Back in the critical nexus dimension, Hikaru didn't hurry to leave the land of glorious nights. After all, he had already promised Gaia that he would stay to observe the new candidate for Domain Lord. That candidate was a night spirit who didn't look particularly strong, far smaller than Gaia, with spirit compatibility at best only around 3 stars, hardly impressive among the knights, possibly even considered low. Regardless, Gaia had high hopes for it. As Hikaru watched the spirit undergo trials and duel Gaia, he gradually realized it was a ritual duel spirit. So that was it, no wonder Gaia favored this spirit so much. In a faction that pursued fusion, it dared to walk the path of ritual summoning and even challenge Gaia. Such courage was something Gaia admired deeply. It wasn't just about going along with the crowd, nor was it opposition for the sake of opposition. It firmly believed in its own path, refusing to stay stagnant. At least in terms of developing a local spirit, it was certainly promising. Therefore, since there were still several 5-star warrior spirits in the domain, Gaia decided to give this spirit 1 month of special training before departing. The spirits naturally didn't want their savior and domain lord to leave, but Gaia was straightforward. It had protected this land to uphold its ideals of knights and warriors, and now that the spirits here had gained basic resistance, it wanted them to face hardships on their own, just as true warriors would. Besides, it wasn't as if it would never return. Spirits lived for an exceptionally long time, there would always be another chance to meet again. Truthfully, after 2 spirit dimension adventures and even experiencing a shadow duel, Hikaru didn't feel tired. His spirit compatibility had been honed in this past half-year, and with the Light of Destruction granted by Boss Light, he had already reached 7 stars of compatibility. Dimensional travel no longer exhausted him. Even so, he chose not to set out on another adventure immediately. On one hand, he didn't want to rush recklessly, in case something happened here that he couldn't respond to. On the other hand, he wanted to prepare for the coming adventure in the DT dimension by crafting some cards with Tiara. He still had plenty of odd materials left unused, perfect for practice. Making an Infernoid or 2 to test for future machine shell production was a fine option. More importantly, Hikaru wanted to experiment with the new alchemy books he had been studying. While Hikaru busied himself with experiments, time continued flowing in the critical nexus. Due to the Dark World invasion, the GX tournament had been suspended for a short while, about half a month. But once the Dark World's Dragon Lord was defeated, the tournament gradually resumed. To make the tournament fairer, Kaiba Corp and Professor Growler agreed to extend it by 20 days. As long as a student could collect 4 seals within the time limit, they would pass. Of course, students with ambition could aim for more seals and higher rankings, or, as Principal Shepard had originally envisioned, they could take the chance to bond with spirits and even gain their support directly. In fact, quite a few students succeeded in collaborating with the Lightsworns during this period and obtained Lightsworn cards. Not only with the Lightsworns, some students, noticing the Dark World demons still waiting idly in the mountains, boldly approached them to seek cooperation. Unfortunately, while the idea was good, the reality wasn't. This wasn't the Dark World's home dimension, and here the Dark World spirits only listened to Jaden Yuki. Because if they didn't, the Lightsworns would wipe them out completely. And Jaden, he still wanted to participate in the tournament. He had already collected several seals, and gathering 8 in total wouldn't be a problem with a bit of effort. That said, the Lightsworns kept a close eye on him, making it difficult for him to move around freely. Meanwhile, he fought the Supreme King every day. Each time he felt close to victory, he would inexplicably lose. Most of all, why was super polymerization so powerful? He thought about it every day. Every time he thought he was near triumph, super polymerization reminded him who was really the boss in a mirror match. Still, there was good news. Jaden leaned back on the couch, staring at the sky, cards in hand. Evil Hero Toxic Bubble, Evil Hero Death Prison Demon. Elemental Hero Gaia, Elemental Hero Core, Masked Hero Gust, Masked Hero Divine Wind. These cards had somehow appeared in his deck during these duels. All of them were cards the Supreme King had used. Could it be? He looked outside. A Lightsworn dragon sword passed, drawing gasps from passing students and leaving trails of starlight. Is it what I think it is? He realized these cards hadn't just materialized out of nowhere. They had always been his. As his duels with the Supreme King increased, he came to understand that the Supreme King's power wasn't bound by good or evil. And so, these cards gradually manifested. Even so, there was still a serious problem. Until now, apart from their very first duel when the Supreme King had spoken a few words, afterward, he never said a single thing, like a soulless dueling machine. Jaden couldn't stand it anymore, flopping back and forth on the couch like a salted fish. So troublesome. Meanwhile. What? Spirits are at war with us? Ches squinted at his phone, question marks popping up above his head. What? Jaden defeated the invading demons, but got penalized? Chaz leaned back in disbelief. Honestly, wasn't Jaden supposed to be a hero? What's with the Lightsworns now? Can anyone explain this? The Society of Light changed its whole personality? Chaz scratched his head endlessly. Just what happened while his teacher had him grinding against AI duel bots? Chapter 404. Chaz's brain was a complete mess, he couldn't figure out what had just happened. After his last duel with his master, Seto Kaiba, he had been detained at Kaiba Corp, dueling against all sorts of robots Kaiba had prepared. After dozens of days, only now did he finally have the time to properly see what had been going on recently. He never expected that every single piece of news would be so shocking. He wanted to call Hikaru or Jaden to ask what was going on lately, but after roughly checking and confirming there was no major problem, he didn't disturb his friends. Instead, he hurried toward the train station. There was only just over a month left until the finals. And he only had a few seals. Although he had one 12-star seal personally awarded by Seto Kaiba, gathering the remaining seals within just one short month was far from simple. After all, just reaching the venue for the final tournament would take time, too. At that moment, he really wanted to complain about his master. Something so huge had happened outside, yet Kaiba told him nothing. Instead, he let him duel robots for over a month until he was sick of it, and then threw him back out, saying, "My disciple must not be mediocre, so the preferential treatment given to other students doesn't apply to you. I've already informed all of Kaiba Corp. You don't get the extra 20 days of compensation. If you can't participate in the finals within this month, June, weigh it carefully yourself. How could he dare waste any time after that? Collecting seals as fast as possible was the only priority. And besides Chaz, there was another completely in the dark person, horrified to realize the world had changed. That was Bastion Misawa. This man, who had stayed in the land of beauties for a long time, finally left the Amazonas village with a muscular, beautiful dual spirit girl in his arms. Under the Empress's cold gaze, he had at last achieved results. Abruptly, once he left the village and started reading recent news, he felt utterly bewildered. The world had changed too quickly. Fortunately, though his intel was outdated, he had already gathered plenty of seals in advance, and without a master hounding him, the pressure wasn't heavy. Just 2 more would be enough. With over a month left, it was more than sufficient. However, there was one thing that still left him quite regretful. In such a major event where everyone could show off, he hadn't gotten involved, and nobody even knew he existed. Compared to these two with outdated intel, the elite group was in a much better situation. Woohoo Zane, look, I caught a seagull. A seagull. Atticus was clutching a strange-looking bird in the ocean region, calling it a seagull. The creature struggled wildly, flapping its body, yet Atticus kept clinging to it. Soon enough, the seagull seemed to give in to him, helplessly landing on the ground. As soon as it hit the ground, Atticus snatched up his camera and frantically snapped pictures. Brother, Alexis Rhodes rubbed her forehead helplessly. This was terrible. Beside them, Hellkaiser flipped through his badge expressionlessly. His badge already held 10 seals, from 1-star all the way to 10-star. Where are they? Where are the 11-star and 12-star duelists? Hellkaiser clenched his right fist, muttering to himself, caring nothing for Atticus, his mind filled only with victory. Watching him, sweat trickled down Alexis's forehead. One after another, why was there not a single one who could give her peace of mind? She glanced at her tablet, at least Jaden's safe now. Oh? Our Alexis is worrying about her classmate? Brother! Not worrying is the real problem. Alexis snapped. Good thing Jaden solved it himself, otherwise, what would he do if he was all alone with no one to rely on? Earlier, when the Dark World forces launched a full-scale assault on the critical nexus, their area hadn't been too remote. Because of the terrain, not many students came here, and with Kaiser and Atticus present, they had been safe, protecting all the classmates nearby. Since their classmates were protected, naturally, the next step was to help others. Then again, who knew she had a brother dragging things down, and Zane, who was eager to duel anyone he saw? By the time they were leaving the ocean region, Hikaru had already sent word that it was over. Aya, Alexis, Atticus wagged his finger with a grin. Too naive, far too naive, Alexis. If you always want seniors to help, how can juniors possibly grow? Besides, Jaden has Kenzan and Cyrus with him. I believe Cyrus will definitely help Jaden. You must believe in his growth. Alexis eyed him suspiciously. Just from one duel between Zane and Cyrus, why was her brother so certain? Atticus smiled. In this area, he had an extraordinary talent. Just one duel was enough for him to judge whether the duelists were sincere, whether they had grown. He looked toward Kaiser and chuckled again. Besides, if Alexis was truly worried, then with Zane's personality, he'd have already dragged her into a machine and flown straight to Jaden's side. No way would he still be here searching for opponents. That sort of thing was impossible. Thinking of this, Atticus dramatically covered his eyes and exclaimed. Alexis, compared to them, I worry about you more. Why are you worrying about me? Alexis protested, clearly dissatisfied. She was the one worrying about her unreliable brother. Compared to me, you're the one who's more worrying. Atticus waved his left hand. Don't be fooled by how much he messed around, he wasn't here for nothing, nor for sightseeing. During this time, he had gotten a lot stronger. More than that, he had already figured out his future path. In contrast, his clever and serious little sister might seem diligent and responsible, but in truth, she was just running around with Zane and him. Hey, Zane! Stop staring off. There's only just over a month until the finals. Let's get ready early and head to the venue. Atticus waved his hand, calling to Kaiser. At those words, Kaiser stopped muttering, frowned, thought for a moment, then nodded slightly. Though Atticus had been pestering him all this time, he had to admit, every suggestion Atticus gave was useful and saved him a lot of effort. So he didn't mind listening. The finals. He couldn't help but laugh aloud. Good. I'll duel stronger duelists, claim more and more victories. Ugh. Alexis sighed. Why were all the men around her so strange? Meanwhile, Johann, Jim, Axel, and the rest of the duelists aiming for the finals began their last adventure. Just a month later, Hikaru checked the time, finally finishing his long experiment. It was time to visit the DT Spirit World. He called over Captain Crystal and Lulu, prepared using the coordinates Tiara had painstakingly obtained. The dimensional gate activated, and he felt dizzy. Moments later, he stood in a patch of grass. Then, he immediately saw a large group of spirits reacting to their sudden appearance as though facing a great enemy, surrounding them tightly. Hikaru froze for a moment. This was completely different from what he had imagined. Greeting them were neither shaddolls nor gemnites. All around him were sticky, inhuman creatures, wriggling like slimes, grotesque and twisted bugs from outer space. A single word burst from Hikaru's mouth. Worms. Chapter 405. Worms, the root and beginning of everything in the DT storyline, and the very first faction. In the DT world, this force arrived on a Nebula W meteorite, crashing onto the DT planet and becoming the foreign invaders of this world. For the first time, the natives of this planet were compelled to cooperate instead of endlessly fighting among themselves. Who would have thought that upon first entering this dimension, they'd run into the spirits of this series? Was it fate, or destiny? What is this? Tiara frowned in puzzlement. They look a bit abstract, and nothing like the life forms Sophia would create. Is this really my home? She muttered under her breath. Even though returning home was supposed to be cause for celebration, once she arrived in this dimension, she suddenly felt doubtful. Was this truly her world? Why didn't she recognize these creatures? Meanwhile, the worms wasted no time. Once they became aware of Hikaru Amaki and Tiara, they frantically dispatched soldiers, encircling the area and shouting, "Intruders! Intruders!" But after the low-ranking worms finished shouting, some higher-ranked warriors recognized Tiara's identity and cried out, "Retreat! Fall back immediately! Don't approach that one, it's Winda, be careful of infection." Even in spirit form, the shaddolls were special within the spirit world. Yet the strangest part wasn't that. The oddest part was that in the true DT world, the worms had no way of knowing what Winda was. Hikaru raised his hand toward the spirits, calling out, "Greetings. I am a human duelist, traveling across dimensions, seeking spirits willing to pursue fusion together." Human? The moment those words were heard, the horde of spirits was dumbfounded, even their leader seemed bewildered. It pondered for a long time, unable to make sense of it. Just then, a thunderous rumbling resounded. A bizarre reptilian monster appeared, its upper body a four-armed overlord, its lower body sprouting eyes and a mouth like some grotesque mount, stomping heavily across the earth. Human, such an ancient term. The Worm King. Tiara scowled. Hikaru hadn't been mistaken, nor had the Gemnites. So, these grotesque bugs really were life forms of her world? Seeing Tiara's bewilderment, Hikaru whispered to her what he knew of the worms, and she nodded faintly in realization. She understood, they were the invasive wormweeds exterminated by her environmental purification machines. So these extraterrestrial creatures had become part of the planet's memory, transformed into spirits? Fine then. Leave this to me, Hikaru. Just as we agreed, I'll become the true god of this dimension. After her duel with Construct in the spirit world, Tiara had told Hikaru she would come to the DT dimension and defeat one faction after another. But, looking at the worms before them, Hikaru hesitated briefly and asked, "Are you sure?" "Ha, of course. Gods do not lie." Tiara lifted her chin proudly. On the other side, the Worm King and Queen, along with the high-ranking warriors, conversed fervently. This was their first time seeing humans, and also their first time seeing a Winda that wasn't trying to infect them. It was astonishing. Yet they still didn't understand why humans had come seeking them. After a short discussion, they turned to Hikaru. "Human, if it is a greater power you seek, then leave here and find a stronger spirit faction." It looked almost forlorn. Though I hate to admit it, our kind may be one of the weakest factions in this dimension. Now, all we have left is this tiny patch of pure land, our last territory. To protect it, we've gathered our entire race to defend this place. There's nothing here you want. Leave at once. Hikaru was momentarily dazed, hearing such words from the supposed invaders. That said, whether in the card stories or the spirit world, he never had much of a real impression of DT itself, so he didn't feel too conflicted. Tiara, however, was displeased. "You came to this world of your own will, and now you have no ambition at all? Fine. You two can be the first pieces in my conquest of this world." She took Hikaru's deck, placed her own into the dual disc. "Worm or not, since you've merged into this dimension, it's all the same. I am the god, the source of destruction goddess, the first deity of this world. Submit to me, pledge loyalty to me, and become my believers." A duel, then. The Worm King ignored the talk of gods, inhaled deeply. "So be it. I've been ready for this." One of its four massive arms twisted, morphing into a dual disc that clung slimily to its body. Its deck materialized by the power of its spirit. "Duel." Tiara echoed Hikaru's way of declaring. Tiara, LP, 4000. Worm King, LP, 4000. Both drew their opening cards. Tiara glanced at her hand and casually asked, "You said this is your tribe's last territory? What do you mean? Are you still at war?" "Of course," the Worm King rumbled. "The DT dimension is at war every single day. Small skirmishes, great conflicts, countless factions clash, turning this dimension into a cauldron of chaos." Hikaru glanced beside him. Captain Crystal appeared, nodded to him. In a low voice, it explained what it knew. From its understanding, the worm's situation wasn't good. Though the worm race had some powerful spirits like the king before them, judging by spirit power alone, Captain Crystal felt the king was surely stronger than itself. But as far as it knew, the worm race lost more than they won. They were one of the easiest factions to oppress. As Captain Crystal spoke, Hikaru studied the Worm King. It remained silent, unable to refute a word. "I see." Tiara nodded lightly. That made it simpler. After all, she had already defeated Construct, one of the strongest Shaddol warriors. Beating these worms should be easy. "My turn, draw." She drew, looked over her hand. Her eyes suddenly glowed with a blue flame, a strange phantom rising behind her. The low-ranking worms huddled together, trembling as they watched. A terrifying, uncanny power of force rooted deep within them told them this spirit before them was no ordinary being. "Activate Ignition." She revealed a spell card, Void Reignition. She showed the Worm King an Infernoid Antra from her hand. This card activates by revealing an Infernoid or Infernoid card in hand. I discard all cards in my hand, then draw the same number I discarded. A unilateral wipeout of her hand. The Worm King calculated swiftly. However, what surprised it most was Infernoids? What are those? Tiara drew 5 new cards. And next, she took 2 cards from the graveyard, Permise and Antra, and placed a monster card on the field. By banishing 2 Infernoids from hand or graveyard, I special summon Infernoid Piety. Unlike the lower-ranking soldiers, Piety's armor gleamed golden, its tubes glowing brightly. Infernoid Piety, level 5 FIRFIN 2200 ATK. The flaming fiend descended slowly from the sky like an angel. Just gazing upon it made the Worm King feel suffocated. I set one card and end my turn. A simple, efficient summoning. Almost no setup, and she called a level 5 with 2200 attack, leaving plenty in reserve. Unknown spirit, this power is genuine. But if you think that alone qualifies you to call yourself a god, then you're far too naive. What? Tiara was stunned. For the second time, her own children had denied her divinity. Though less bitter than the first time, it was still vexing. Yet what shocked her more was my turn, draw. The Worm King looked at its hand. I activate the equip spell, Future Fusion. Future Fusion, huh? Tiara nodded lightly. It was a card Hikaru loved. Of course, she knew it. So, worms were a fusion-type faction, too? What would they summon? I fused together all 25 of my brethren from the deck. How many? Chapter 406. Worm Apocalypse, Worm Barsas, Worm Carteros, Worm Dimicles. Worm Hope, Worm Illidan, Worm Zetelicts. Worm Lynx. Each time the Worm King called out a name, Tiara's heart gave a jolt. By the time it finished reciting over 20 names, the Worm King drew in a deep breath, exhaled long, then swung its forearms and roared, Worm Queen. Worm King. Worm Victory. Fusion of 25 worms. Come forth, from the distant cosmos, the origin of us all. Fusion Summon. Level 10, Worm 0. Rumble. From the ground, countless worms took flight, clustering together, then merged into a colossal, sun-like sphere of slime. Worm 0, Level 10 Light Reptile? ATK. Worm 0's attack becomes the number of different fusion materials times 500. Tiara's mouth slowly fell open as she watched the writhing ball of bugs grow larger and denser, until it loomed above like a true sun. Worm 0, ATK, 12,500. 12,500 attack. Tiara blinked rapidly, then stiffly lowered her head to glance at Hikaru Amaki, instinctively pointing upward, eyes filled with bewilderment. Weren't these just weeds? If Hikaru was right, these things were the alien weeds exterminated by her Gen X planetary environmental machines, yet those weeds had something this terrifying? A fusion of all 25 archetype monsters. That was several times stronger than even that so-called Cyber End dragon. The Worm King slowly clenched its fists. Behind it, the tribe erupted in cheers at the sight of Worm Zero's appearance. This was their clan's strongest and final bulwark and ultimate fusion card usable only when every member of their kind was present. Though now pressed down to a tiny scrap of territory besieged on all sides, they had endured by relying on this supreme power. Worm Zero gains effects according to the number of different fusion materials used. With 2 or more. Once per turn, special summon 1 reptile from the graveyard facedown. It thrust out its hand toward the graveyard, rise again, my brother, Worm Victory. Worm Zero projected a beam of light like a UFO transporter, reviving 1 worm from the graveyard to lurk silently on the field. With 4 or more, once per turn, banish 1 reptile from your graveyard to send 1 monster on the field to the graveyard. It lifted a card from the graveyard. I banish Worm Hope. Then it pointed at Piatti on Tiara's field. Boom! Bathed in the light, the mighty fiend collapsed before it could act. With 6 or more, once per turn, draw 1 card. Draw. Tiara swallowed nervously. Staring up at that massive creature, she couldn't help but feel tense. She had a set card, however, it wasn't a defensive one. If it could attack directly, would she be instantly wiped out? Tiara. She turned toward Hikaru. Don't worry. A monster fusion summoned with future fusion can't attack the first turn. Oh. Right. She hastily wiped imaginary sweat from her brow. She had nearly forgotten. The sight of such a massive monster with such staggering attack had completely overwhelmed her novice duelist nerves. Now that she remembered, relief washed over her. In truth, Hikaru had already wanted to remind her earlier. When Worm Zero sent Piety to the graveyard, she could have tribute herself to banish another monster from the opponent's graveyard. Despite that, she hadn't reacted at all. In Hikaru's eyes, Tiara's current state was odd. "What's wrong?" he asked curiously. "What's wrong?" Tiara hesitated a moment at his question. Dozens of possible answers flickered through her mind until she found the source. She flexed her right hand. Indeed, her mindset was off. She lifted her head, scanning her surroundings. This dimension wasn't her planet. Yet, environmentally, it was a perfect 1:1 mirror of the world from which she had once arisen. Eons had passed. She herself had long since become a spirit, lost the chance of bodily resurrection, and could only persist alongside Hikaru as a dual spirit and monster god. Her arrival here had filled her with too much excitement. The world was no longer the one she knew. Perhaps these worms, in her lifetime, were just weeds she could have swept away with ease. That said, even weeds, if their will was strong enough, could rival the divine. That was the possibility Duel gave the weak. Though they were invaders, these ones weren't truly invaders, merely historical phantoms left behind. She tapped her temple lightly. If she wished to become the god of these phantoms, she would have to play by their ways. Duel. Delif. Even the weakest race could field a 12,500 attack fusion in a single turn. Truly, her world had been a garden of 1,000 blooms. But all the better. The Worm King set a card face down and declared the end of its turn. Then, at this moment, I activate a continuous trap. Void Purification, activate. A trap card slowly flipped. Void Purification. My turn, draw. Tiara drew. During the standby phase, Rekindling activates. I target one of my banished Infernoids and return it to the graveyard. Antra, reborn. Watching Tiara's move, the Worm King could roughly grasp the Infernoid deck's flow and operations. I banish Antra from the graveyard. I special summon Harmatic in defense position. The Black-Winged Fiend descended before Tiara. Infernoid Harmatic, level 3 FIRE Fiend 0 def. Tiara gauged her field carefully. Honestly, she had to admit one thing. At the start of this duel, she had underestimated her opponent. This was no mere alien bug, it was a true dual spirit. Despite that, she hadn't taken it seriously. Otherwise, with her oppressive power, she could have locked the Worm King out from ever summoning high-level monsters. However, it was precisely this misstep that had opened her eyes. If duels were only about raw power, wasn't that just like the cosmic god? She wasn't about to lose, rewind time, and make Hikaru laugh at her, or worse, cancel their partnership. Worms, you pool your strength, uniting only for survival. Thus, you see us as enemies, trespassers in your land, don't you? The Worm King hadn't expected her to still make conversation, but snapped back, of course. You appeared suddenly and challenged us, did you come for peace? Foolish. Tiara's blue flame eyes burned softly. I am the god, the source of destruction goddess, the origin of this dimension. I care nothing for your current ecology. This human beside me is Hikaru Amaki, a duelist pursuing ultimate fusion. We ask nothing of you. We seek cooperation. Mutual growth. She said, if you truly fear war, if you truly desire peace, then join me in ruling this dimension. Together we'll defeat every other spirit tribe. It'll simply mean becoming the world's enemy once again. Chapter 407. After the duel ended, the Worm tribe treated Hikaru and Tiara as honored guests, inviting them to the worm encampment. Though they looked like insects, one mustn't think worms were ordinary bugs. In truth, in the original DT storyline, the worms were a highly advanced alien civilization that had invaded many planets, one of the great powers of the universe. The DT planet itself was not some pure sword and sorcery fantasy world, it had skyscrapers, science, and all manner of mysterious things. The worms possessed the ability to alter their species and create new types of worms to counter different enemies, evolving faster than the DT natives' own scientific research. Now, even though the worm spirits hadn't fully inherited their race's abilities, just as shaddolls retained some infectious powers, the worms still possessed unique capabilities. For example, they could mimic the architecture and technology of other tribes. The worm tribe lived in modern skyscrapers, each worm with its own work and tasks. Once they learned Hikaru and Tiara weren't here to seize their last bit of territory with ill intent, and even wished to converse, these hard-luck spirits of the DT dimension shared everything they knew with Hikaru. During this, Captain Crystal and Lulu also appeared to talk with the Worm King and ask about the current situation of the dimension. In this way, Hikaru finally grasped the broader state of the DT dimension. It was, as he had imagined, complete chaos. Every single faction that had ever appeared in the DT dimension was now living in this spirit world. It was worth noting that this spirit world was enormous. Beyond the planet itself, outer space was also part of it, and spirits were said to live there, too. In short, alien spirits, though they were also spirits of the DT spirit world. In such a crowded world, their relationships hadn't entirely followed history but instead evolved into their present forms. Because of their racial traits, the worms had once inhabited all over the planet. However, since they bordered so many others and lacked real advantages in power, they had gradually dwindled down to this final territory. Because of this, however, their grasp of the DT dimension situation was far clearer than even that of Captain Crystal the Gem Knight. At present, the strongest and largest force, also the most indifferent to others, was the Ice Barrier. This faction was said to almost never fight outsiders, keeping to themselves unless directly invaded. Beyond that, each major faction had its own tricks, its own methods, and its own peculiarities. The Gem Knight Order was one of the more famous forces, without much fixed territory, aiming to protect weaker life and roaming the dimension as famed champions. I heard about it, one of the Order's captains went missing. So that was you, someone remarked. Captain Crystal rubbed the back of his head, speechless. Tell me, where is the Order stationed now? And how long would it take to get there from here? Captain Crystal had already resolved to follow Hikaru, to help more suffering spirits. That said, if possible, he still wished to report back safely to the Order and return Lulu there. Sorry to disappoint, but your Order is on another continent. You don't have a ship, do you? Another continent? Captain Crystal shook his head regretfully. Reporting back wouldn't be a matter of just a day or two. Anyhow, his master didn't have that kind of time. Besides the famed Ice Barrier and Gem Knight Order, there were forces like the Fabled, who stirred up wars everywhere. And their earlier nervousness at Tiara was because in this world, the Steel Swarm and the Shaddolls were two highly dangerous groups. Contact with them could mean immediate infection or death, demanding special treatment, just like when Captain Crystal had been infected and the Gem Knight Order had to isolate him in the fractured dimension to await a cure. Had he not stumbled into another dimension by chance and been found by Leo Akaba, Hikaru would never have met him. In essence, in this dimension, apart from the aloof Ice Barrier, the most dangerous groups to watch were the Fabled, the Steel Swarm, and the Shaddolls. Each had its own style and tactics, and their high-level spirit power and dueling ability placed them among the top tiers. Extremely dangerous. Beyond that, the countless other factions all had their own grudges and friendships. Even so, as long as you didn't meddle, they'd ignore you, just as the Worm King had urged Hikaru and Tiara to leave when they suddenly appeared. In the DT dimension, the most famous taboo was don't gawk, don't meddle. As long as you followed that, travelers of any race would usually be left alone. I've heard the Wind Witches once had spirits from other dimensions appear here, the Charmers, with all sorts of attributes, earth, water, fire, wind. The Worm King told Hikaru. But that place is too far. I've never seen them myself. Hikaru pictured it in his mind. In any case, Hikaru and Tiara listened carefully to the Worm King's understanding of the world, preparing for what came next. Hikaru's greatest goal was, of course, the Shaddolls. Tiara's as well. Albeit from what they'd learned, unless the next teleportation was random again, they wouldn't encounter them soon. Still, collecting Shaddolls through normal means was enough. Hikaru hadn't heard anything of the Machina in the Worm King's knowledge, so it wasn't urgent. Therefore, the closest place would be their next destination. Besides the Shad Dolls, the Ritual Beasts, Naturia, and Gem Knights each had their own specialties, each a remarkable faction. Their fusion monsters were all distinguished. The Gem Knights couldn't be found quickly. That said, the Worm King said the Ritual Beasts and Naturia had habitats all across the planet, with many strongholds. Those were viable options. Finally, after thoroughly learning all this, the Worm King even courteously gifted Hikaru a DT navigation device. Said to be an adventurer's essential, it could help you skirt battlefields and flee quickly. Hikaru felt genuine goodwill toward these unlucky but honest spirits. After all, they hadn't done anything except take beatings every day. He also exchanged some cards with the Worm King, since the Worm King did indeed hold Worm Zero. Hikaru gave him spare cards, things like Overload Fusion, which might aid their fusion tactics. While it didn't fix the worm's fundamental weaknesses, it could still help them use their fusion strategy better. In return, Hikaru obtained 3 high-level fusion monsters and many fusion materials. To be honest, even though Worm Zero lacked protection, it was hardly weak. With the right combo, like with Eternal Night, it could unleash dramatic and stylish plays. The real issue was, the worm's low-level monsters were just too weak. Hikaru carefully stored his gains, bid farewell to the Worm King, and teleported back to the critical nexus. It had gone far better than expected. He had thought he'd land in a brawl with the Shad Dolls. Though the finals were still some time away, he wanted to arrive early if possible. He had come lightly, but left laden with gains. As Tiara followed Hikaru away, she cast one last wistful look around. These mountains, these waters, this air, it was nostalgic. Their figures slowly faded from this dimension. And at that very moment, the Worm King suddenly felt something strange. Glancing around, he sensed the wind stir violently, the clouds in the sky seemed to shift. As though, after Hikaru and Tiara left, this very world itself, like a living heart, throbbed once. Chapter 408, Finals begins. Returning to the critical nexus, Hikaru packed up his things, spent a few more days burying the dimensional gate deeper, and then left this dimension with Gaia. Though reluctant, farewells were inevitable, and the time had finally come. Carrying the Amaki name, Hikaru felt he had the right to speak such words. Back at the starting point, Hikaru sought out Jaden and Sartorius. Sartorius's condition had improved, but the overwhelming power he had borne still left him recovering. For now, the Society of Light's affairs were being handled by his sister, dealing with internal matters bit by bit. Naturally, he would not be participating in the finals. Similarly, while Aster Phoenix had the strength, he had spent all his time searching for Sartorius and DD, leaving him without even a single seal. Even if he pushed himself, he couldn't possibly gather 8 within a month. Too lazy to take seals from classmates or pro-duelists, he had simply given up on entering. As planned from the beginning, now that the critical nexus was secure, it was time to return to surfing, completely saying goodbye to the past, turning the clock's hands forward. The same was true for Jaden. He had been dueling the Supreme King inside the starting point, so he hadn't gathered any more seals. Naturally, he couldn't enter the finals either. Still, he seemed rather happy these days. Do your best, Hikaru, bring home the championship. Jaden cheered him on. Hikaru only shook his head helplessly. Though Jaden was absent, many strong duelists remained. Chaz and Zane were both prime contenders for the title, not to mention other elites from branch campuses. There were also Jesse, Jim, and Axel, though it was hard to say just how strong they had become. For example, Hikaru had heard Jesse had obtained Rainbow Dragon. A Crystal Beast deck with Rainbow Dragon was on another level compared to one without it. Of course, Crystal Beasts were an abstract deck to begin with. That said, it all depended on who used them. Jesse's Crystal Beasts were bound to be something else entirely. Over the past month, Jaden's situation in the critical nexus had also eased. Most of the Lightsworn spirits, after a month of observation, accepted that the reincarnated Supreme King was not the same person as before. Still, some spirits considered the Supreme King's power evil and dangerous, and continued to watch him closely. Even so, the restrictions were far lighter than before. If Jaden wanted, he could have easily gathered 8 seals in time. But He simply wasn't interested in dueling others right now. Besides, he didn't want to leave. Though he could consult Hikaru, he had his own thoughts now. What to do with the remaining Dark World spirits weighed heavily on his mind. Until he figured it out himself, he wasn't leaving. Hikaru packed his things, boarded the dimensional train, with Selena tagging along excitedly, determined to witness the finals up close. The GX tournament, officially called the Genius X Tournament, was organized by Principal Shepard as a world-class, cross-dimensional competition. Hikaru didn't know what GX originally stood for, but here, it meant Genius X, a tournament to crown the ultimate genius. The goals were twofold. Encourage students, giving ordinary duelists a chance to grow stronger. Select the strongest duelist, the X, Genius X, the greatest prodigy in the world. Students would gradually return to checkpoints to have their badges inspected, ranked by seal stars and numbers, before returning to the human world. Those aiming for the finals, however, would take the train to Kaiba Corp headquarters in the Critical Nexus. There, for over half a month, they would duel in matches broadcast live throughout the Critical Nexus and human world alike. It was both a popularity boost and a stage for young duelists to shine. Unlike the S-Dimension's Friendship Cup, this finals truly aimed to decide the strongest new generation duelist in the world. Not only Academy students, many pro duelists had also joined, making it a grand spectacle. Though there had been minor incidents, they were nothing compared to the likes of Orichalcos or the Fusion Army's invasion. Spirits attacking humans barely registered as serious anymore. Thus, no matter where they were on the planet, audiences were glued to the finals, be it through live streams or television. When Hikaru and Selena disembarked, Kaiba Corp staff greeted them, asking to see their seals. Hikaru showed his, and after confirming, they exchanged it for a new, more ornate badge. It still bore GX on the front, however, the back was engraved. He was the 19th qualified duelist to arrive. Your badge has been recorded and archived. After the finals, you can reclaim it from our staff as a keepsake. All right. Hikaru nodded. Since many friends had left marks on his badge, he was glad he could keep it as a memento. Selena, however, hadn't gathered 8 seals, so she was directed to the spectator entrance. Led by staff, Hikaru entered the duelist hall, where he immediately spotted many familiar faces. Bastion, Zane, Atticus, Alexis, familiar duelists were everywhere. Alongside them were strangers, likely pro-duelists or students from other academies. Yo! Hikaru Atticus waved cheerfully. Nearby, Zane, usually stern, lit up with interest the moment he saw Hikaru. Senpai, Hikaru greeted, then fished in his pocket, though in truth, he pulled a violet vial from his book and tossed it to Zane. Zane caught it, glanced at it, asked nothing, opened it, and drank. Zane? Hikaru? Alexis nearly jumped in shock. What was that all about? Good. I feel revitalized. Zane's eyes sharpened, pressing a hand to his chest. Atticus's grin faltered, worry creeping in. Nothing much, just some juice I got from a friend. Bastion frowned suspiciously. There was no way that was juice, he was certain. They hadn't even discussed goals yet, and Hikaru had already handed over some concoction. And Zane was never one to drink juice. Could it be? The thought crossed his mind. Hey! If it isn't our famed lover boy of the seas, Bastion Misawa. Looking good, I thought you'd be pale by now. Hikaru abruptly changed the subject. What? Lover boy? Chaz, walking in, blinked. Misawa's in love? Back before becoming Kaiba's disciple, he had fantasized about romance, but under Kaiba's harsh tutelage, he hadn't thought about it in ages. His teasing left Bastion red-faced, while Hikaru turned to greet the group. Been a while, Hikaru, Chaz said, his eyes blazing with fighting spirit. His goal was singular, the championship. And one of his greatest rivals was Hikaru Amaki. This was no time for friendship. As if resonating with Chaz's determination, Zane chuckled darkly. Victory will belong to me, no matter what. Regardless, truly, every duelist there was after the title. Eager anticipation filled the hall, the atmosphere ready to erupt even before the matches began. Hikaru also spotted Jim and Axel, greeting them warmly and making introductions. As more duelists gathered, night gradually fell. Staff glanced anxiously at their watches, puzzled. Their colleagues shrugged in confusion. Finally, half an hour later, Jesse arrived, scratching his head in embarrassment, admitting he got lost. Kaiba Corp staff, knowing his sense of direction, could only sigh helplessly. Every strong duelist had their quirks, and Jesse was one such eccentric. Checking the log, staff announced, all registered duelists holding 8 seals are now present. We will now read the tournament rules. The lengthy rule reading began, though everyone already knew the gist beforehand. And so, the GX Tournament Finals, Round 1, begins now. Beside them, a Blue Eyes Gacha machine spun, soon releasing 2 numbered balls. Contestants 23 and 31, please come forward. Chapter 409. The first duel of the GX tournament began. All over the world, whether it was night or day, whether adult or child, everyone interested in dueling, everyone pursuing it, tuned in to watch this match. As the screen lit up, Kaiba Corp's GG logo flashed by, and a massive white dome appeared before everyone's eyes. As the dome appeared, its top slowly cracked open. Then, like a blooming lotus, the dome unfolded outward, revealing its interior. A huge duel field, vast as several basketball courts, slowly rose up. Around it, cameras and lighting equipment flickered to life. With a thunderous cheer of woe, the seating inside the dome revealed itself. In the stands sat students from various branch campuses. Some held placards to cheer for their own schoolmates, while others were simply here to enjoy the duel, celebrating loudly. And beyond the students, a special group of spectators had also gathered, the duel spirits. They were placed on the stands opposite the duelists' sides, able to see both competitors. Compared to human spectators, they were far fewer in number, but their presence made the students roar and stun countless viewers watching the stream. Spirits. The legendary duel spirits. Since the beginning of dimensional exploration, this was the first time they appeared before humanity and watched a duel together. For many curious viewers, simply seeing spirits made all the waiting worthwhile. And these spirits weren't just here for fun. In this grand clash of geniuses, if they encountered an interesting warrior, they'd gladly lend their support. With the lights blazing and the crowd's cheers booming, colorful fireworks burst overhead. The grand event had truly begun with its first duel. Duelist number 23 versus duelist number 31. Hikaru Amaki was number 19, Ches Princeton was number 20, and then came Jim and Axel Brody. So number 23 was someone Hikaru didn't recognize. Jesse Anderson was the last to arrive, holding number 37. The lower the number, the earlier they had shown up, albeit that didn't necessarily mean they were weaker. In total, 37 duelists entered this tournament. So there would almost certainly be buys or revival matches. Kaiba Corp would decide the details later. No matter what, the first duel of the GX tournament was underway. The two competing duelists were strangers to Hikaru. Both seemed like classmates, one wore blue, the other red. From appearance alone, it was hard to tell which academy they belonged to. Only when they introduced themselves did Hikaru learn, one was from the Eastern branch, the other from the Northern Europe branch. The Eastern branch. Hikaru remembered that was where Adrian Gecko came from in the original story. But this time, he hadn't seen Adrian. Perhaps Adrian was still searching for Exodia's power. Duel, the two shouted together. And so, two unknown classmates began the tournament's opening duel. Hikaru lounged in the standby seats, hands behind his head, watching the stream. His friends leaned in as well, clearly intending to analyze the match for any future opponents they might face. Strangers or not. Who knew what kind of duel might unfold? Every duelist here was worth paying attention to. And, as if answering everyone's anticipation. Synchro Summon. Level 6, Explosive Magician. Whoa, Synchro. The audience erupted in shock. However, in the standby hall, once the first surprise passed, they quickly settled into a serious discussion of the duel. Occasionally, some glanced at Kaiser. Zane, however, paid no mind, eyes locked on the stream. After all, he had used XYZ summoning in their dimension and even brought out an XYZ monster. Naturally, that sparked everyone's interest in trying Synchro and XYZ summons themselves. Arriving in the critical nexus dimension and meeting spirits, of course, they'd be inspired with new ideas. Countless students here were trying to learn Synchro and XYZ summons. Yet, most failed to earn the spirit's recognition. Even if they did, those powers only worked inside the critical nexus. Back in their own world, Synchro and XYZ should still be impossible. Unless, it was a case like Zane's. While one duelist showcased Synchro summoning, the other didn't flinch because he revealed his own trump card, Skill Drain. Hiss, that's one nasty card. Chaz Princeton sucked in a cold breath as duelist number 31 flipped his trap card. It couldn't fully stop the opponent. That said, while this card remains on the field, the effects of all face-up monsters are negated. That was terrifying. His Vito Z and Light and Darkness Dragon would both become blank slates, unable to use their true power. I see. Using Skill Drain to negate the opponent's monster effects, then summoning high ATK monsters with drawbacks to fight? With Skill Drain, the drawbacks vanish, leaving raw stats as absolute advantage. Bastian Misawa nodded repeatedly. As a calculation-based duelist, he found the strategy highly effective. While they discussed, Atticus Rhodes unknowingly leaned close to Hikaru, whispering, "Hikaru, what did you throw away earlier?" "I still on the duel," Hikaru replied quietly, "an electromagnetic resistance potion. I got it in the Spellbook Tower dimension, from an alchemy apothecary there." Electromagnetic resistance, so it really was electricity. I knew it wasn't my imagination. Atticus drew a deep breath. Dragging Zane through the critical nexus for duels hadn't just been about hanging out with his sister and friends, he'd been watching them closely. His sister was still herself, brilliant, beautiful, yet never thinking about her own future. Zane seemed even sharper, wiser, more magnanimous than before. But Atticus had clearly seen his body worsening by the day. Now, he finally had his answer. So what's the truth? Hikaru thought for a moment. Principal Shepard told me. Cyberdark cards are too powerful. They shock their wielder. It's the spirit's way of testing their bearer. A test of life itself? Atticus's outrage was plain. But soon, he forced a grin, scratching his head. "Ha, so that's it. Haha, Hikaru, if anything fun happens again, you'd better tell me, alright?" He laughed and patted Hikaru's arm. "Brother, stop bothering Hikaru." Alexis, distracted from the duel by his laughter, turned and scolded him. Hikaru only smiled. "Ha, alright. I'll tell you next time." Atticus nodded solemnly. He couldn't care less about winning championships. That wasn't the kind of duelist he was. But this time, he had to settle things with Zane, one way or another. Chapter 410. The first duel ended amidst the cheers of the crowd. The victor was duelist number 31. Though number 23 had mastered Synchro summoning and fought with everything he had, unfortunately, his opponent had his own strategies. With clever trap monster combos, he secured a brilliant victory. Still, even though number 23 lost, he was not forgotten. Almost immediately after the match, countless companies tried to contact him, flooding Kaiba Corp's service lines. Zane Truesdale, the first to use an XYZ monster, had already become the face and symbol of one corporation, treated with greater prestige than even its executives. He was impossible to poach. So the duelist who became the first to use Synchro summoning. Of course they wouldn't let that chance slip by. They scrambled to sign him as a representative. Even if Synchro summoning only worked inside the critical nexus dimension, it was still a massive selling point. The crowd's passion burned higher than ever, and the duelist's spirits followed. Soon, the next duel began on schedule. Hikaru Amaki kept watching, one match after another. Knowing your enemy was crucial. Even if he didn't directly face them, he needed to grasp each duelist's style. That way, he wouldn't be blindsided by an unfamiliar card. With each round, unique strategies and powerful tactics came to light. It wasn't just Duel Academy students. Some young pro duelists also took the stage, demonstrating their own mastery, stepping into the spotlight as symbols of the next generation. More unusual duelists appeared: Special Forces soldiers, loners, even obscure challengers Seto Kaiba had dug up from remote corners. Each was formidable, each had their own cheering supporters, humans and spirits alike. A Gravekeeper duelist? No way. I thought they never left their clan. Bastion Misawa stared wide-eyed at the broadcast. I heard the boss himself went to recruit him. Must have been a lot of effort. Chaz Princeton muttered uncertainly. This duelist clearly wasn't a pro or student. Kaiba had personally brought him from the Gravekeeper clan. He looked about the same age as them. In any case, Hikaru didn't know him. And he was running a Gravekeeper deck. Duel over. Winner, duelist number 13. Bastion clenched his fist in triumph and marched back toward the standby hall. The defeated duelist, like number 23 before him, was escorted to another waiting room by Kaiba Corp, likely for a revival match later. Bastion inhaled deeply as he entered, just about to share the good news with friends when the Blue Eyes lottery machine began spinning, dropping a number ball. Number 19. The room froze. His friends, who had been ready to greet him, turned instead towards someone sitting further back. Almost every duelist fell silent, gazing at him. The top contender for champion. Hikaru Amaki heard his number and slowly stood. Beside him, Tiara yawned, appearing with a drawl. Finally, your turn. Hikaru nodded lightly. Heh, so it begins at last, Hikaru Amaki. Someone whispered his name. Everyone awaited his opponent. Were. Number 36. Several sighed in relief. Others groaned with disappointment. 36? I'm 37. Jesse scratched his head in frustration. He'd really wanted to duel Hikaru. Back during their meeting in the S Dimension, when he befriended Jaden, he had already wanted to test himself against Hikaru. The chosen duelist quietly picked up his badge, raising a brow. Though he had worried about facing Hikaru, after all, it might mean early elimination. Now that fate had chosen him, there was no room for fear. He would eliminate Hikaru first. Bastion didn't dwell on losing the spotlight. Instead, he grinned and gave Hikaru a thumbs up. Hikaru smiled, waved to his friends, and followed Kaiba Corp's staff toward his entrance tunnel, as his opponent headed to the other. A new match is about to begin. Please wait patiently, this one will surely be even more exciting. As the announcement rang out, white mist filled the air. Two figures emerged from separate gates. Interest spiked immediately. Chaz had once entered with such flashy theatrics. Everyone knew this meant another notable duelist. As the mist cleared, they saw them. Duelist number 36, Pro Duelist Phantom, Chen Lu. Duelist number 19, the Absolute Fusionist, Hikaru Amaki. Hikaru Amaki. Suddenly, the arena and the broadcast audience fell into stunned silence. Some who didn't recognize the name cheered anyway, only to turn to neighbors and ask, who was Hikaru Amaki? Very quickly, his deeds and past exploits spread. Some felt unease. Some felt dread. But the students and spirits were already cheering. It's Hikaru. Amaki-senpai is here. Cheer for him. That human called Hikari, this duel will be fun. Master, go for it. Ordinary students, Fusion Club members, spirits like Serena who had heard of Hikaru all shouted for him. Scanning the crowd, Hikaru spotted a group in suits cheering for him. Beside them, Rex Raptor stood with one hand in his pocket, waving casually with the other. Hikaru laughed, throwing back a fist in return. The students no longer doubted him. The only skeptics left were the uninformed masses. Not that Hikaru minded. Quite the popularity you've got, Chen Lu remarked coolly. But I won't hand you the win. Ha, I was about to say the same. Then. Duel, they shouted together. Duel Academy Main Campus Ace, Absolute Fusionist Hikaru Amaki, LP, 4000. Pro Duelist Phantom Chen Lu, LP, 4000. Boom! Fireworks burst as Hikaru drew 5 cards from his deck. Glancing down, then at the hovering drones filming him, he couldn't help but smirk. Well then, time to remind them who I am. He raised his hand toward the cameras, waving slightly. I am Hikaru Amaki of Duel Academy's main campus, spokesperson of Funglo Corp, Fusion Duelist. Fusion is the noblest summoning method. That wraps up this part of What If Fusion Deck User in a Different Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. Thanks so much for listening. As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.